Many years ago, I tried to explain to a religious person that studying philosophy will teach one to think. They thought it was nonsense because everyone knows how to think, as they put it. You probably already have an idea of how bad their thinking was. Of course, pretty much everyone is able to hold a thought in their consciousness, and technically, I suppose that is a type of thinking. But it really is merely entertaining an idea. Proper thinking is critical, self-aware, and informed by an understanding of how one can fail to think rationally. You know, the sorts of things I explained in my series, Introduction to Philosophy and Critical Thinking. Humans may be capable of rationality, but it does not come easily or naturally. We have to practice and keep trying to learn, and even then we sometimes fail. We are prone to falling for many cognitive biases and logical errors. Some paranormal beliefs may be due to failure to think critically. The most obvious mistake to make is believing claims and even one's own first hypotheses too easily and making up one's mind about things in a rigid manner. One should always be ready to look for evidence and best arguments with an open mind. Hi, my name is Jouni Vilkka, and this video is part of my series on Anomalistic Psychology, mostly based on the book by French and Stone I keep mentioning. If you're interested in psychology and the paranormal, then welcome to my channel, TFF, Teacher from Finland. Don't forget to subscribe and click the thumbs up button. Psychologists have looked for explanations for paranormal belief in the cognitive functioning of believers and, among other things, found that they assign more intentionality to random events than non-believers did. This is the sort of thinking that easily leads to conspiracy beliefs. See my video on the philosophy and psychology of conspiracy theories for more on that topic. One mistake that can easily lead to paranormal belief is the illogical leap from not having an explanation for the experience or an alleged phenomenon to assuming it to be inexplicable. Clearly, one should not conclude anything from one's own ignorance, except that more information is needed before forming any opinion. But when one has an idea of a paranormal cause for a phenomenon and it fits the description of the phenomenon, it may be difficult to realize that even then there could be mundane causes that would explain the phenomenon as well. French and Stone remind us that when there are social forces at play, such as one's friends sharing similar beliefs about the paranormal, it becomes very difficult to disagree with them. We are social animals, and the cost of standing up against one's social circles may result in being cast out, a dreadful prospect for most people. The social phenomenon known as groupthink can occur when members of a group share attitudes and beliefs. They begin to adopt more extreme versions of the common beliefs. As contrary views tend to not be expressed, the unanimity of the voiced views may create the illusion that the group is truly unanimous, and that can further lead to more extreme views. Members might not even try to look for information outside the group. People are notoriously bad at probabilistic thinking, as French and Stone show. This leads to belief in the paranormal because people are too impressed by random events, believing coincidences to be much less likely than they actually are, and so assuming a paranormal cause for them. For example, precognitive dreams and telepathy may seem like plausible explanations simply because one is unable to assess probabilities correctly. A typical mistake is to look at alleged probabilities of individual events and then calculate the unlikely probability of them having occurred in conjunction. French and Stone use as an example the case of Sally Clark, who was found guilty of killing her 2 children because an expert calculated that the odds of 2 sudden infant deaths, SIDs, in the same family are 73 million to 1. This calculation was done by multiplying the probability of one SID by the same probability. This is how you would calculate the probability of such an event beforehand, and even then, only with the assumption that these are independent events. As it happens, there are genetic reasons for SID, so that already ruins the calculation. Worse, you cannot assign a probability for an event that has already occurred, and use it as the basis for such a calculation. That a professional pediatrician can be so bad at calculating probabilities should drive home the point that humans generally are horribly bad at it, and definitely need to study it to be able to do it properly. We don't just automatically know how to think. It takes effort to learn how to really think, and this is especially true about probabilistic thinking. As French and Stone write, an amazing coincidence requires explanation only if you predicted it in advance. One of the reasons for believing in so-called complementary and alternative medicine is a phenomenon known as regression to the mean. It refers to things like health, among other things, often varying in a cyclical pattern. Simply put, any illness will usually get worse before it gets better. The worse it gets, the more likely the patient is to try new treatments. But whether they get any treatment at all or not, they are likely to get better. Since they do get better after trying some treatment, like faith healing or homeopathy, they will easily attribute their healing to that treatment. That logical fallacy is called post hoc ergo propter hoc, literally before that, therefore because of that. And it is understandable, but now that I've explained it, you can probably also see why it is a fallacy. Just because something occurred after another thing, we cannot deduce it was caused by that other thing. Perhaps the person had already been taking real medicine for a while, and wouldn't that be a more likely real cause of the healing? Another difficulty with probabilistic thinking for us is called illusory correlation. French and Stone explain how we can easily start believing that 2 events are occurring together more often than they statistically should. For example, a good luck mascot bringing us good luck. We will easily remember when the 2 occur together, because our memories are selective and will remember the striking cases when we were lucky. It is much more difficult to practice counterfactual thinking, to come up with examples of cases where we were not lucky, or where we did not have the mascot with us. Drawing a table as follows would help. We might be able to compare the number of times we had good luck with the mascot, A, to the number of times we had good luck without the mascot, B. But it is more difficult to think about all the times we had the mascot but did not have good luck, C, and even more difficult to think of all the instances when we had neither the mascot nor particularly good luck, D. To assess whether our mascot actually improves our luck, it is not enough to calculate A divided by A plus C. We have to compare that to B divided by B plus D. And only if the first is significantly higher do we have any reason to believe that the mascot improves our luck. But like I said, it is not easy to even assign reasonable numbers to C and D. Believers in the paranormal have been shown to have a stronger tendency toward illusory correlation than non-believers. The same is true for illusory control. That refers to believing one is in control of an actually random process. We humans tend to think very highly of our cognitive abilities, but our abilities are not as great as we'd like to think. French and Stone discuss how psychologists have studied the way our minds distort evidence. For example, participants in a study were asked to read text passages supporting and challenging claims about extrasensory perception, ESP. The researchers found that those who had a prior belief in ESP remembered the supporting passage afterwards better than the other, which was also distorted in their memory. Non-believers were not so biased. French and Stone observed that when we are dedicated to our prior beliefs, we will try to discredit opposing views. We will look for flaws in the reasoning or evidence provided, applying all our critical thinking skills to defend our prior belief. Yet we uncritically accept arguments and evidence if we agree with it. This can be dangerous if people apply such a biased way of thinking on social issues, and through discussions with supporters of alternative views only strengthen their convictions. This is why teaching skepticism is so important, in my opinion. One of the ways we trick ourselves mentally is called the Forer effect, or perhaps more commonly the Barnum effect, after the showman P.T. Barnum. It is a form of subjective validation. It is what happens when you read your horoscope and note that it seems to fit you very well. A clue to why that might happen could be found if you accidentally had read an incorrect horoscope and still had found it so fitting. The reason is that the wording is suitably vague, and you only think it fits you because you interpret it so. It is, by the way, quite possible, if you have had the habit of reading your horoscope, that you have been reading the wrong one for a long time. That is because of an astronomical phenomenon that I don't have time to get into here, called precession. If you look into it, you may find that your actual sun sign is not what the usual horoscope would tell you. I'll add a link to a website about this in the description below in case you want to check what your real horoscope sign is. The point of the Barnum effect is that we are likely to interpret vague expressions in a way that suits our prior beliefs, and this is why some people may be convinced by the vague language. They might not even realize how vague it is because their minds so easily interpret what is being said when words like often or generally are used, for example. We also tend to see forms in randomness, and believers in the paranormal see such things more likely than others, even when there definitely is nothing there to see, because psychologists have created the random image to test them. A very common type of this misidentification occurs in Pareidolia, where some random form, such as a cloud in the sky, looks like a human face. This is perhaps due to our evolution, which has pushed us to develop so that we would easily recognize and pay attention to faces, because especially in early childhood that is essential for our survival. Now we can use this tendency to entertain ourselves by watching clouds or splashes of paint or even burnt toast, to see if they resemble objects, random faces, or perhaps religious images. Some religious people have actually thought that they are witnessing a miracle when their perceptual faculties have interpreted randomness in a suitable way. A different kind of perceptual error causes us to perceive an object, such as a dot of light, as moving. This is caused by the autokinetic effect, and not understanding how that works while watching the night sky is likely the cause of many UFO sightings. There is an even funnier way to make a similar misperception, as I once saw in a TV documentary on UFOs. A person was trying to film what they thought was a UFO in the sky using a handheld video camera. It is very difficult to hold one steady by hand, so understandably the light in the sky, as seen on the recording, appeared to be moving. Human perception in general is not very reliable, which is why eyewitness testimonies, even in mundane cases, such as criminal trials, should not be trusted as much as they often are. And perception is not the only unreliable part of our cognitive machinery. Our memory doesn't work too well either. Later knowledge tends to distort our memory due to hindsight bias. We may recall our dreams in a way that makes it seem to us in hindsight that they foretold what would happen. Our selective memory can also emphasize those predictions a fortune teller told us that seemed to come true, all the while ignoring the vast number that didn't. In fact, a trick used by such people for a long time, according to what I already learned in the 1990s, is to make different predictions in different publications while using vague enough language, of course. Then, afterwards, you can look through all those predictions, interpreting them in the light of recent events, and highlight your apparently successful predictions in your advertisements. The critical thinker will of course note that a prediction only counts as one if the condition of its success and failure are made known along with the prediction, not after the fact. The problems with memory are highlighted by studies showing how malleable our memories really are. They can be changed and even created fairly easily, causing false memories. This is especially likely to occur, even by accident, when hypnosis is used. Seeking alleged repressed memories has caused an incredible amount of suffering and waste of resources. The person with the recovered memories created by a quack of a therapist suffers from the traumatizing false memory, but also innocent people have been convicted of crimes as a result. If you have no idea of what I am talking about, look into a mass craze called the Satanic Panic that occurred mostly in the US and UK in the 1980s and 1990s. You might want to compare that to the witch panics of the early modern period as well. Contrary to the idea of repressed memories, traumatic events are, at least typically, far from being repressed, and the problem with such memories is, on the contrary, that they keep on rising to the surface of consciousness, no matter how much you would rather forget or ignore them. Hopefully, this has given you some idea of the sorts of cognitive reasons there may be for belief in the paranormal. Next time, I'll look into social reasons. I hope to see you back on my channel then. Bye for now. If you wish to support my channel, please click thumbs up, subscribe, and share my videos. Any comments on the videos would also be welcome.